The Surprising Adventures of Baron Munchausen with Willy Rushton and Toby Longworth. Episode 2, Hunting Tales. There have been those so-called experts residing at minor American universities across the proverbial pond, for example, who have expressed the view that the legendary Baron Munchausen of Bodenwede was a man steeped in blood. That, just because his mode of relaxation happened to be the honourable pursuit of fur and feather, he was no great lover of nature. What an absurd notion! As any visitor to the baronial castle could testify, the walls of even the smallest room bore heads and hunting trophies of every kind. Ample proof that the Baron liked, even in his most relaxed moments, to be surrounded by his friends from the animal kingdom. But let us return to the library, where the great adventurer will tell us more of his expedition to Russia.
No doubt you'll be expecting me to write of the politics of Russia, of its wonderful paintings, of its charming people, and of its magnificent court, where incidentally I was a tremendous success. If so, I'm afraid I must disappoint you. Because in Russia, the true adventurer does not stay in town looking at pictures and making small talk with perfumed idiots in wigs. He escapes to the countryside, where the opportunities for cool-headed heroics are limitless. The bear, the wolf, the wild boar, the stag, I faced them all in the forests of Russia. Within months I was renowned as one of the greatest huntsmen ever to have visited the country. And I saw some of the strangest sights imaginable. On one occasion I came upon 2 wild pigs, one behind the other, making their way through a forest glade. I was intrigued. Remembering that the wild pig has no feelings in its tail, at least none it's ever mentioned to anyone, I took aim, and with one shot of my gun severed the tip of the front pig's tail. It ran off, but to my surprise the pig that was following it now stood stock still. I approached cautiously, for only a fool or a town person would underestimate the ferocity of a pig. It soon became plain what had happened. The pig that stood before me was an old sow, completely blind, and it was being led home by one of its family when I came upon it. My duty as a sportsman was clear. I took the end of the tail, which was hanging from the old sow's mouth, and led it slowly back to my house, where it soon became a favourite of my servants and was frequently led for short walks by my dog. Pigs, as you probably know, make surprisingly good pets. But perhaps the most extraordinary adventure in the forests of Russia concerned a stag and a cherry tree. Like all well-educated men of my age, I knew the story of St. Hubert.
St. Hubert is, of course, the patron saint of all sportsmen who, according to legend, was once visited by a great stag with a holy cross between its mighty antlers.
One question had always bothered me about this event. How the deuce did that cross manage to get there? It was now that I discovered the answer. One evening I was wandering home through a wood after a day's sport, when in the gathering gloom I became aware that my path was blocked by the biggest and noblest stag that I'd ever seen. It stared at me for a matter of seconds, before calmly lowering its head as if to charge. It was at this moment that I remembered that, although I was carrying a gun, I had no more ammunition. Indeed, all that I carried in my pouch were a few cherries left over from my lunch. Thinking quickly, I ate a cherry, loaded the cherry stone into my gun, and the stone struck the stag in the middle of its forehead, stunning him slightly. Shaking his great head, he trotted off, leaving me to make my way home unharmed. About a year later, I happened to be passing through the same stretch of wood, when I saw a quite extraordinary sight. Walking through a glade was the very same stag, but now it had growing between its antlers a 10-foot cherry tree. It looked at me for a moment before shaking its head and trotting off into the trees. It had left behind it a carpet of dark red cherries on the forest floor. Hardly able to believe my eyes, I tasted one of the cherries and found that, despite a slight hint of venison, it was quite delicious. Thus it was that, quite by accident, I discovered the secret of St. Hubert's stag. Obviously some sort of priest or clergyman had been taking a walk in the forest, and to protect himself from a passing stag, hurled at it the very first thing which came to hand, which happened to be a cross. Like the cherry tree, the cross took root between the stag's antlers and grew. This is my explanation for the so-called miracle of St. Hubert, and frankly I've yet to hear of a better one. My exploits in the forests and plains of Russia soon made me famous throughout the land as a courageous and skilled sportsman. Indeed, even my faithful greyhound bitch Chica became something of a celebrity.
There has been considerable controversy in academic circles about this greyhound Chica. For, on other occasions, the Baron has referred to his favourite dog, a small fox terrier, by the very same name. It is my considered opinion that the Baron, being a good-hearted man, bore such affection for his greyhound that, when she died, he acquired a small fox terrier, which, as a tribute to his old friend, he also named Chica, and it is this second Chica...
Balderdash claptrap! The greyhound and the terrier you see at my feet are one and the same dog.
The same dog, Baron?
And the explanation for this is simple. Chica ran so fast and so far when she was a greyhound that over the years she wore her legs down to stumps. Today she lives and hunts quite happily as a terrier. Yet in her younger days, Chica was the fastest dog I ever owned, forever chasing hares and foxes. On one occasion, she put up a particularly large hare, and although she was heavily pregnant at the time, set off in pursuit of it. For a while, my horse was unable to keep pace with Chica and the hare as they disappeared over a hill. Then, it seemed no more than a few moments later, we heard the unmistakable sound of a pack of greyhounds. Deuced off, I thought to myself.
Deuced off, indeed. It has been remarked by Dr. Myron Bogle of Wisconsin University, deploying the leaden wit of which he is so proud. In his now discredited volume, Baron Munchausen and the Pathology of Self-Delusion, Bogle stunned the academic world with the observation that, and I quote, "To this point in time, and indeed since this point in time, greyhounds had never been known to give tongue or make any kind of noise while hunting." Oh, very wise, Dr. Bogle. Very perceptive. Of course Chica was an unusual beast. That was precisely the point, wasn't it, Baron?
The sight that greeted me as I topped the hill is with me to this day. No fewer than 7 hares were being pursued by 7 greyhounds. It was clear what had happened. Like Chica, the hare had been pregnant, and during the course of the hunt she had littered, producing 6 leverets, which ran with their mother. Seconds later, Chica had given birth to 6 pups, so that now the family of greyhounds was hunting the family of hares. Moved by this astonishing miracle of nature, I decided to call off my pack, and I whistled for Chica. The pugs, who were as clever and obedient as their mother, greyhounds are, of course, among the most intelligent of God's creatures, followed her back to where I stood. The family of hares hopped away to safety. Unfortunately, not all of my encounters with the natural kingdom have ended so happily. Once, while walking down a narrow street near my house in St. Petersburg, I found myself facing a snarling mad dog. Thinking quickly, I slipped off the fur coat I was wearing and threw it at the dog. As it tore at the fur, I made the best of my way home. Later I sent a servant out to fetch the coat, one of my favourites, which I put away in a wardrobe with my other clothes. The next day I was taking breakfast when my maid entered in some distress. "Come quickly, Baron," she cried. "There's something horrible happening in the wardrobe in your room. It's alive." Taking the stairs 2 at a time, I hurried to the bedroom, where sure enough the cupboard was heaving from side to side. I threw open the door and cursed. The fur coat, which had been bitten by the rabid dog, had attacked all the other clothes in the wardrobe, and at that very moment was threatening my best-dressed suit. I ran to fetch a gun, returned, took aim, and with a single shot put the fur coat out of its misery. I confess I was in a black mood for the rest of the day. Call me a sentimental fool if you dare, but it cut me to the quick to see the passing of a valued garment under such miserable circumstances.
Could there be any more eloquent refutation of the charge that Baron Munchausen was a man without heart? Even the death of a fur coat moved this sensitive, life-loving man.
Of course, many is the time when my admirers have asked me, "But, Baron, what was your favourite animal? The noblest creature that you've ever encountered?"
Loyalty to God's creatures, as well as to his fellow men, was perhaps...
Bucephalus, my horse, my steed, my charger, but above all, my companion. Now, it so happened that this extraordinary horse came into my possession under rather unusual circumstances. A few weeks before I went to war as a senior officer in the Russian army, I was a guest of Count Przhevalsky at his country house in Lithuania. One afternoon I was taking tea in the drawing-room with the ladies, while various members of the Count's establishment were in the yard below, looking at a young horse that had just arrived from his stable nearby. Suddenly we heard sounds of alarm and confusion from below. "Ladies," I said, getting to my feet, "I regret to have to tell you that a horse is going berserk in the yard, and that I must leave you to your tea. This will not take long." I hurried downstairs to find a group of men were trying unsuccessfully to control a powerful young grey horse that was snorting, kicking out, and rearing up in panic. With one bound I was on his back. Despite the fact he had neither bridle nor saddle, I rode him about for a while, and in a matter of minutes he was as gentle and obedient as any horse could be. Just to show the ladies that there was no need to be alarmed, I trotted him towards the house and had him leap straight through the drawing-room window. Without disrupting the tea party, I walked, trotted and galloped about the room, and then, to gasps of delight from the female company, I rode onto the table where my horse performed a few tricks I just taught him, without so much as breaking a single cup or saucer. Count Przebrowski, not surprisingly, wished to show his gratitude to me. He begged me to accept the young horse as a gift, on condition I would ride him into battle on behalf of Russia in her war against the Turks. I was honoured to accept. It was a harsh and bloody campaign, and I was forever in the thick of the action. It's not my style to prattle on about my heroic deeds as a soldier, a practice I leave to those leaders and politicians who like to talk their way through war from the safety of their local coffee-house. Like any professional soldier, I simply refuse to boast.
The Russian-Turkish War, which the Baron has so modestly glossed over, was essentially a territorial dispute that escalated in the year...
I well remember the occasion when the speed and courage of Bucephalus won us a famous and highly unusual victory. I'd been ordered by our commander, Count Munich, to take my troop of Hussars to the front of the Russian army, where we spearheaded the battle against the Turks, driving them back towards the town of Okshakow. One afternoon, we were camped on a great plain, when I noticed in the far distance a number of the enemy approaching us in a cloud of dust. It was impossible to see precisely how many Turks there were, so I ordered my men to spread out to the left and to the right and gallop towards the enemy, setting up as much dust as possible. I would stay in the centre between them, the most dangerous place, and hidden by the dust on both sides of me, I would make straight for the Turks until I was close enough to judge their strength. It was a bold plan, and it worked. So terrified were the Turkish troops when they saw my left and right flanks galloping towards them at speed that they halted. Seizing my opportunity, I descended upon them, cutlass flashing in the sunlight, inflicting heavy casualties. As my flankers moved in to help me, the Turks turned tail and fled. There was a walled town nearby. Pursued by my hussars, with Bucephalus and me at the head of them, the enemy entered its main gate, rode straight through and appeared to leave by a gate on the opposite side of the town. It was now that my great Lithuanian war-horse Bucephalus proved his worth. Keen not to let the Turks escape, I spurred him to greater efforts, and he left the rest of my troop labouring far behind me. I entered the town alone. Thinking quickly, I decided to wait in the marketplace for the rest of my soldiers to catch up before proceeding with the chase. I waited and waited. The town seemed to be silent and deserted. But where were my hussars? Searching the back streets for Turks? Lost? Had I been tricked by the enemy? I walked Bucephalus to a nearby water trough, where he drank deeply and at length. After a minute or so, I became aware of the sound of running water behind me. Looking round, I saw something which all but broke my heart. The entire back half of my beloved Bucephalus was missing. He was standing on his front two legs, and the water he was drinking was pouring straight through him. No wonder he'd been unable to quench his thirst. As carefully as I could, I rode him back to the main gate, where I discovered what had happened. As the Turks had ridden full tilt through the town, one of them had dropped the portcullis. As you probably know, this is a heavy gate with spikes on the bottom, which is dropped to prevent the enemy entering a town. Riding at the front of my troop, I had, in the heat of the chase, failed to see the portcullis descending. It narrowly missed me, but cut my horse clean in half. When I raised the gate, I found my soldiers waiting outside the town. With them also, standing patiently, were my horse's hindquarters. Fortunately, all was not lost. In my troop there was an excellent blacksmith. Since both halves of Bucephalus were still warm, he was able to join both parts together and sew them up with the young sprigs of some laurel trees that were near at hand. Not only did the wound heal perfectly, But after a few weeks, a glorious laurel hedge was growing on the back of Bucephalus, just behind the saddle. I'm told that today I'm the only commander in the world who can actually ride about, sheltered from the sun by his very own hard-earned laurels.
Of course, the Baron, like all great soldiers, suffered hardships during his campaigns. It was not all glory. As I expressed it in my introduction to the collected papers of Baron Munchausen, no man who dares, who laughs in the face of danger, as this great adventurer did, can expect triumph to be utterly untinged by tragedy, hardship, and loss. It was later in the campaign when...
I was not always successful, heaven knows. There was the time when I was captured by the Sultan. If it hadn't been for my first trip to the moon, I could still be there, tending to the Sultan's flocks of bees. What, you'll say? Munchausen? A slave? But yes, it happened that I had fallen into the hands of the Turks, and was sold as a slave for a Sultan.
The Surprising Adventures of Baron Munchausen featured Willy Rushton as the Baron. The editor and all other parts were played by Toby Longworth. The stories were adapted by Terence Blacker and produced by Diane Mathias.